Hi, I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning, this is Jonathan Small, host and producer of All About You. This program is broadcast every week at AccessTV.org studios. This program is designed to give the guest a chance to give his or her life story. And this morning I have a guest that's running for the congressional seat in the 3rd District here in Connecticut, and he's going to give his life story. This morning I have James Brown. Good morning, James. How you doing?
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Nice to meet you too, okay?
Thank you.
Could you kind of let people know exactly where you were born and raised?
I was born and raised in Newtown, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the youngest of 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
And public schools all the way,
Mm-hmm.
Newtown High School. Class of 1987.
Mm-hmm. So what was it like growing up in Newtown?
Well, when I was growing up, Newtown was a small town.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it wasn't well known at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it is now.
Yes.
And it was a nice town. You know, we just normal people doing their normal day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, riding bikes on the roads and
Mm-hmm.
no helmets. I remember that. And
Okay.
just a nice New England town.
Mm-hmm. Now, what did you kind of pursue growing up? I mean, what did you kind of want to be when you was growing up as a child?
Well, as a child, I wanted to be a baseball player.
Uh-huh.
That didn't work out.
Okay.
But as I got through high school, I realized that math was a strong point of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a senior in high school, I was in a math class, and the teacher was explaining a subject, and I found that other students weren't understanding what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
So I would give my interpretation,
Mm-hmm.
and the students would understand what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
So there, the light bulbs kind of went off and said, hey, maybe I should be a math teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pursued that, and I went to UConn, earned my Bachelor of Science in mathematics,
Mm-hmm.
and then continued on to get my teaching certification. So.
Now, what did you do after you get your teacher's certification? Where did you go after that period of time?
In 1992, I got my certification. At the time, we were going through some difficult economic times. 1992, there was a slight recession.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent my resume out throughout the state and throughout the nation.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, I landed in Harlingen, Texas,
Okay.
and where I decided to take a job teaching math. And so I packed all my stuff up into 2 suitcases and
Mm-hmm.
flew down to Harlingen, Texas,
Mm-hmm.
and began my teaching career. Mainly because the other option really was to become a long-term sub
Mm-hmm.
and try to get a foot in the door. That's what most of my friends did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, stayed in Connecticut, got their foot in the door. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be a substitute teacher. I wanted to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided on an alternate path of moving out of state, get experience, and with the plan of coming back home
Mm-hmm.
and teaching in Connecticut. So 3 years in Texas, and then I decided to come home.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I wanted to be back in Connecticut. I just love, you know, that's where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have a job lined up, but I knew I wanted to be back.
Mm-hmm.
So I came home, sent my resume around again,
Yeah.
and I ended up landing at Bunnell High School in Stratford.
Mm-hmm.
So that was in '95.
Now, what was it like in Texas when you was living down there? I mean, what type of big city for people out there that your town was close to? Was it really big?
The largest city, Harlingen, Texas, is in what's called the Rio Grande Valley.
Mm-hmm.
It is deep, deep South Texas. It's about 10 miles from the Mexican border,
Mm-hmm.
about 15, 20 miles away from the Gulf of Mexico. So it's right in the tip of Texas,
Okay.
really the southernmost part. The biggest city down there is Brownsville,
Mm-hmm.
which was about 20 minutes, half hour away from Harlingen. Other cities in that general area, you may have heard of McAllen, Texas. That's down in the same general vicinity. Harlingen is about 2 hours south of Corpus Christi. Kingsville is also north, and so it's an hour and a half from Kingsville. About 4 hours south of San Antonio.
Okay. All right.
So the town itself was a town of about 50, I want to say around 50,000. Mainly Mexican American population, 85% Mexican American, 14% white, and 1% other.
Okay.
So it was a great experience. Loved the town, loved the people, and it was just different. I'm a Connecticut boy, so I wanted to come home.
All right.
But it was a fantastic experience.
So you came back home now, and you're in Stratford teaching.
Yes.
And what type of town is Stratford now? What type of atmosphere is your job like in that particular area teaching?
Well, Stratford is a very diverse town. I mean, it's a town that has very wealthy and very poor. People of all walks of life. It's a great town. It's a town that's mainly a snapshot of the U.S. in my mind. So you have people of, like I said, all walks of life, all abilities, all levels, all races, all religions. I mean, it's really a neat town. Excuse me. On the shoreline of Connecticut, and so you have one of our motto in Stratford, our town saying is "From forest to shore." Offering more from forest to shore, because we have a town forest, and we also have the coastline on the shore, and it's a nice little town. About 45,000, 50,000, so it's about the same size town as Harlingen was. Like Harlingen, there are 2 high schools in Stratford, so I found it pretty easy to get acclimated to Stratford when I came up. So.
Do you teach in a public school system?
I do.
Okay.
Yep. I've taught for 3 years in Harlingen, which was public school, Harlingen High School. Go Cardinals.
All right, nothing wrong with that.
Then I came in and I taught at Bunnell High School for the last 18 years. Go Bulldogs.
All right.
And like I said, there's 2 public high schools in Stratford, Stratford High and Bunnell. I've been at Bunnell for the 18 years, and I recently resigned from teaching in June so I could pursue full-time the congressional run. I also have been very active with coaching, as I've coached cross-country, indoor track, and outdoor track at Bunnell for my whole time there, basically.
Now, as a math teacher, I don't know what particular school that you teach at. Is it like a school system that has a good, good atmosphere, good grades, or is it a struggling public school system? And what type of school system is it?
It's a good school.
It's a good school system.
It's a good school system.
Okay.
Like any school system, there's problems and there's the highlights and lowlights, but it is a very good school system. The people that work there are fantastic. The teachers are great. Most of the students are great.
Okay. So you don't really have like a stressful job. You're not dealing with a lot of disobedience and,
teaching's stressful no matter what.
Even
if you're in the best school in the world, it's a stressful job.
Okay.
Because you're constantly working with individuals, and individuals have personalities.
Okay.
So you're working and trying to put personalities together, and you're in a classroom with 20, 25 individuals. Sometimes you get students that don't get along with each other.
Okay.
So you need to be able to work through that. Sometimes you get students that don't want to work, and you need to try to pull them along. So regardless of what school district you're in, I believe teaching is one of the most stressful, one of the more difficult jobs out there. Now, I may be a little biased since I've been doing it for so long, but it is not something that people on the outside think it is. Once you're on the inside and you start teaching and you learn how difficult it is to motivate students to do the work, You realize it's tough. It's tough.
So as a teacher, you have to have that, not just the academic credentials, but you have to have the ability to motivate students and get them to
Absolutely.
learn.
Absolutely. You can't just be an academic and know your subject matter. If you don't have the personality to connect to students, it's gonna it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be real tough.
Now, on your bio, it seemed like you traveled throughout the cross country 3 different times. Is that true?
True. Absolutely true. I joke about it one time. My last year in Texas, the summer before my last year, I drove back and forth for summers. And the last year I went to Texas, I joke about it. I drove to Texas via Alaska.
Oh,
so
kind of long.
A little bit out of the way, but it was a fantastic experience. And the reason why I did that was I got certification in Alaska. So I was thinking at the time, after 2 years in Texas, I was ready for a change. I knew I was going to do a 3rd year in Texas, but at that time, after the 2nd year, I didn't know if I was going to come back to Connecticut or if I was going to go somewhere else. And I was young, adventurous, so I got my certification in Alaska, and they were having a teacher job fair in Fairbanks, Alaska, the 2 weeks before school began in Texas. So I decided, what the heck? Let me go out to Alaska, check out the job fair, see if there's anything interesting that piques my interest, and then I'll go down to Texas and teach my last year in Texas and make a decision what I'm going to do. So I was going to go by myself. My parents said no. They put their foot down and said, we're going to find somebody else that can go with you. And through church, they did find a young gentleman that I had actually coached in Little League baseball. And he was 18 at the time. And I taught him how to drive my stick shift car, my Honda Civic, and we went out and shared the driving load and went out to Alaska, checked out the job fair, found out that the only jobs that I would be able to get would be off in the bush of Alaska, like in one of the small islands, either in the Aleutians or the Pribilof Islands off the coast of Alaska, and that didn't
suit you.
Didn't really suit me. I was thinking more Fairbanks, Anchorage, Juneau, but so I decided, okay, Alaska's it's beautiful state, but not for me for teaching. It's just a little bit too far. And when you drive there, you realize how far it really is.
I gotta be, you're going way across the country now, you're talking about. So, well, I mean, at this point now, you've kind of decided that you want to run for Congress. Now, why do you want to run for Congress here in the 3rd District?
Well, I'm running for Congress in the 3rd District mainly because I live in the 3rd District. So I didn't really necessarily choose to run for Congress in the 3rd District. It's just where I happen to live. I'm fearful for our country. I find that our deficit and our debt is becoming out of control. We have $17.3 trillion of debt. So almost 17.4 now. At some point, we have to pay it. We have to pay it off, or else nobody's going to borrow money, or no one's going to lend us money anymore. That's really what it is. And when that happens, interest rates are going to rise. When interest rates rise, inflation occurs. And when we start having more inflation, our money's worth less. So, and there's plenty of examples throughout history where debt gets countries in severe trouble. The classic example would be the Weimar Republic in Germany between the wars, where they were experiencing astronomical inflation. And there's pictures of the gentlemen walking their wheelbarrows full of money to get a loaf of bread, and the wheelbarrow's worth more than a load of money. So I don't want to see that happen in the U.S. I'm not saying it will, but at some point we have to stop being a debtor nation. At some point it's going to be too much. Right now we are over 100% in GDP. We have more debt than we make in a year. Everybody combined, put together, couldn't pay off our debt in a year. So that's one issue. Other issues I have this, and I think most people do, have an aversion to coercion. I don't like being coerced into doing things.
Okay.
It's my, maybe it's my American spirit. I just don't like being coerced into doing things. And being a teacher and having the Common Core issue coming through, it might be a great program. That's not my issue. My issue is the coerciveness of the institution, of putting it forth. The federal government has no authority in the curriculum of education. That's left to the states and the local communities. So it's not, understand it's not a federal mandate, but it is tied to federal funds. Okay. And that's a big issue with me.
Let's take a break at this particular point, and we're going to come right back and finish up where we had left off at. Again, this is Jonathan Small, host of All About You. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back very shortly. Thank you.
I'm very happy to be here tonight to congratulate and support AccessTV.org. AccessTV.org has reached hundreds and thousands of people. It's done a great job informing the community about important issues in our city, our state, and our nation. I congratulate Stan McCauley and Nyesha for the job they've done. And now with their new format, which will reach many more people, and which will be available through many more formats, the future is very bright for AccessTV.org. Congratulations, and may you continue your mission of informing our community. Thank you very much.
Jonathan Small, hosting All About You. This morning I have a candidate in the congressional seat, actually running for the congressional candidate in the 3rd District, James Brown, and he's going to kind of finish off where we had left off at. Let me just ask you a question. As a congressman representing the 3rd District, what would be your day-to-day duties if you was able to become elected?
Well, the day-to-day duties of a congressman is really to come up with legislation that affects the nation. It doesn't just affect the 3rd District.
Okay.
And really you're debating what's best for the country. A legislator at the federal level is the lawmaker.
Okay.
So the day-to-day duties really are, or should be, just what laws should we have as a nation. I think we've gotten away from the federal mandates, the constitutional mandates that were laid out back in 1787. And we've lost sight of the actual constraints of the federal government. The federal government was given constraints. They're not supposed to be in our day-to-day lives. Now, that being said, since they are in our day-to-day lives, I'm not suggesting we eliminate that, but we need to have a standard to follow. And the Constitution is that standard that we need to stay focused on. So what I'm trying to do is refocus the federal government into its rightful role, which should be, in my opinion, to deal with the big issues, international, state to state, interstate issues, not person to person.
Okay.
I just feel like we have gotten away from the big picture, where states are supposed to be dealing with person-to-person issues, towns, local communities, where where an individual can affect more change. As an individual, it's very hard to affect change at the federal level.
Okay.
And once the federal government starts taking power that wasn't necessarily granted to them, it's very hard to get it changed back. Whereas in a local community, it's much easier because you're dealing with a much smaller population. So my idea is to try to slowly move the federal government back into its defined role.
Well, do you think the residents in Connecticut kind of understand exactly what you're talking about? I mean, do they understand what these issues and policies affect their day-to-day life? I mean, do you think people are really aware of what you're talking about?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
And that's part of my job to educate. As I go through the process, I need to learn how to express those ideas and views, and explain why it may not be the best idea for the federal government to get involved in, for instance, education. As I mentioned before with the Common Core, besides the fact that I feel the coercive nature of it, having a single one-size-fits-all kind of plan for the whole nation, after traveling the nation and seeing it, I just don't think that works. The students in Connecticut need different education than a student out in the bush of Alaska who's trying to survive. There's, when you're not dealing with the same kinds of employment opportunities. In my opinion, education should be geared toward helping students with employment. That's kind of the point of education, is to become a useful member of society.
Well, you're saying education is a main priority that you would be advocating towards if you was to become elected in Congress?
Well, I always advocate education, but like I said earlier, it's not the federal government's role.
Okay.
As a law-making entity. I will always advocate education as an individual, but I believe it should be left up to the states and the local communities. So removing the coerciveness of the federal government that's tied to money. I have no problem at the moment with federal government supplying funds for communities, for education, but it's when they start tying those funds to specific curricula is where I have a problem.
Okay.
Does that make sense? You understand what I'm
It
saying?
definitely clarifies what you people need to understand about, the whole plan and process. Now, the position that you would be running for, that position as a congressman would give you the political power and the influence to kind of implement what you are looking to pursue?
Well, it would give me a voice.
A voice, okay.
Obviously, with 434 other congressmen, I'd have to find others that I could work with to do this.
Okay.
But as a citizen, I can go to my congresswoman and hope that she follows through with what my ideas are, or I can run for Congress,
Okay.
possibly win, and my voice becomes magnified, and the voice of the constituency would be through me, and just have a different vision. Have a different vision for the country, and free people up to pursue their own personal desires.
Well, let me ask you a question. As a math teacher or a former math teacher and a person that represents the 3rd District, the largest county would be New Haven County.
Correct.
New Haven is an urban city, and it has a lot of urban major problems.
Yes.
Public safety, public school systems. Do you think the people, as the registered voters and the residents in that particular county, really take politics and policy serious, or you think it's a challenge to try to get them to realize the importance of it?
I think it'll be a challenge.
Okay.
I think that people do realize that politics do affect them.
Mm-hmm.
One of my big things would be to try to explain how to become independent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't. It pains me when people are tied to government or tied to anything, tied to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
We need to work together.
Mm-hmm.
I need to work with my neighbors and my community to do what I want to be able to do, but it's on a voluntary basis.
Mm-hmm.
I want people to be able to, if necessary, be able to live without another individual, if necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it will never be necessary. But if you can stand up for yourself, you have, that increases your freedom. And that's what it's all about, is to be able to increase freedom. So become independent. But don't be independent unless you have to. You know, does that make sense?
Well, when you say independent, you're not talking like so much an independent or registered voter. You're talking about independent individually.
Be able to be self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient. Okay.
If you need to be self-sufficient, you should be able to be self-sufficient.
Does that come from the Republican conservatism in you, or that's something else that you?
That really comes from my own upbringing, I think.
Okay.
Be able to stand on your own. And if you can't stand on your own, then your life, you're putting your life into other people's hands. And that to me is a very precarious and scary situation. When you are reliant on others for your own well-being, as a normal human being, to me that's very scary. Because if that individual or that entity that you rely on is no longer reliable,
yes,
then where does that put you?
So that sounds like to me the social service and the safety net that exists in particularly Connecticut, which has many social programs.
Yes.
Now the Republicans and the conservatives are trying to look at these programs and try to revamp them or to remove them. It seems like the Democrats want to continue to have these safety net programs. And I guess the argument on the conservative side, the Republicans, is that these programs are causing a lot of damage. It's not providing responsibilities. It's allowing people from generations to grow up being dependent.
Right.
And it's actually doing more harm than good. What would you advocate, or what would you be the voice towards trying to fix that problem?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't advocate eliminating programs right now. I'm more in that I'd like to see people voluntarily work towards becoming independent. The programs are there, that's fine, but people need, take pride in yourself and figure out a way to become self-sufficient. That's and try to explain why. Why should I become self-sufficient when this program is helping me out? Well, what if that program goes away?
Right.
What happens? Because you don't control that program. What happens if that program does go away because of some catastrophe or whatever? You need to be able to figure out how to be self-sufficient. So
now, the side that the Democrats like to advocate is that Republicans and conservatism is all about big business. They can't relate to the everyday working poor people that exist in this country. And basically, these groups of people have been forgotten, that, they're not properly educated. They can't fit into being self-sufficient as you advocate in many cases. And it's like, to me, it's getting kind of complex because it's on one hand, I'm hearing one side saying these social programs are causing the problems, and the other side is saying that, without these problems, the problems would be worse because we don't have anything to really offset it. So, I mean, where does the balance come in at, in your opinion?
I don't have all the answers.
Okay, I'm not saying you have to have all the answers.
But my feeling is, when I was young, I was on free and reduced lunch at one point.
Okay.
Because my father was a math teacher, and he was raising 4 children on one salary, and he lost that job well, actually, he resigned due to political issues at the time. And so I understand the need for some safety net, especially for the children.
Yes.
But it's supposed to be a temporary thing. It's a help you get on your feet kind of program. It's not supposed to be a lifelong situation.
Yes.
And I believe we need to figure out a way to make it temporary, but still have something there to, just in case you have tough times. But just my personal upbringing is to always work and strive to become, like I said earlier, self-sufficient. Not saying that you want to isolate yourself from the world, but be able to become self-sufficient somehow.
Somehow, yeah.
And that's through education. And with today's technology, really, there's not. I don't see a lot of excuses for not becoming more well-versed. Spending time in the library or whatever. I mean, I would never force anyone to do it. But,
right.
But we have such access to information today, and I don't think we have been, as individuals, using it enough.
Well, let's be honest. The U.S. is slipping when it gets to academics and higher education and education in general. We're not really as strong as other countries when you rate us throughout the world.
Right.
And the social services programs, I mean, it's not just that alone. There's some other factors that exist in this country too. And obviously, you can't do it all by yourself. Now, we have a governor's race coming up the same time as this congressional race is coming up. Do you think it matters, when you have a state like Connecticut, which is labeled the blue state, to have more of a balance between the Republicans and the Democrats?
I think it's always good to have conversations.
Okay.
Whether it's Republicans and Democrats, or if it's unaffiliates with other unaffiliated voters, or if to me the labels don't necessarily matter.
Okay.
It's having the conversation,
right,
and understanding that people are different. People have different ideas, but most people are looking at what's the best for our country, and we need to have sit down conversations like we're having right now.
Right.
And you may not agree with what I'm saying, and I may not agree.
What you're saying, okay.
And that's okay. I think you want what's best for our country. I'd like you to think I want what's best for my country. We may be coming at it different points of view, but we need to have the conversation so we can learn.
Okay.
I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying I have all the answers.
Right.
I have ideas, but my ideas aren't locked in stone. If someone can convince me that a different way is better, okay, that's fine.
Well, James Browns, we are actually out of time for this particular segment. If there's any last words you just want to say before we close it up.
Well, if you like what I'm talking about, if you want to learn more about me, feel free to go to jamesbrownforcongress.com and read a little bit more about my positions and issues.
Okay. Well, that's fair said. And I wish you the best of luck in this up-and-coming November race here in Connecticut.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, you're welcome. Again, this is Jonathan Small. I had hosted All About You this morning on accesstv.org studios. I enjoy doing this program every single week. And there's a lot of other good programs on accesstv.org throughout the week that you could also tune into. And as I say every single week, for people out there, have a very blessed day and keep the faith. Thank you.